The CDC has issued a new warning about HIV risks associated with a cosmetic procedure called the vampire facial. The procedure involves drawing a patient's blood and injecting the platelets into the face. Some say it can reduce wrinkles and acne scars. But a recent report by the CDC shows a link between the procedure and a risk for HIV transmission. It highlighted a case in New Mexico where 3 women contracted the virus after they received vampire facials at an unlicensed establishment. An inspection found blood vials and needles that showed signs of being reused. Also, at least 2 clients had tested positive for HIV before their visits to the spa.
This is the Rebel Call Channel. Welcome to today's show. You're probably seeing that news clip and saying to yourself, well, what's the big deal? What's the surprise, right? Well, it's pretty incredible that in the year 2024 that we even need to hear the quote-unquote CDC or any organization tell us that it could be dangerous to get a vampire facial, right? But of course, this is the sign of the times that we're living in as they continue to normalize what are satanic rituals. And people out there just go, satanic ritual, why? Because they're putting blood on their face. It's not really a satanic ritual. No, it actually is a satanic ritual. Of course, blood baths and blood facials have become normalized, but this goes back to the 1600s when witches like Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who was a sadistic, murderous vampire / witch, was performing murders and committed over 600 murders of young girls. Of course, you don't hear about that because they don't want you to realize that there was a female who killed 600 young girls who happened to be a witch who was using the blood of these young children to bathe in the blood of the young children and do vampire facials of these young children. And before I get into the story about the CDC and, of course, all of these people that are now getting diagnosed as being positive with HIV, let me also point out that witches for centuries and centuries and centuries have been using blood as an anti-ager, as a method of anti-aging. Now, we know they obviously drink blood. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these women who are, and I'm sure men too, in today's world, there's no real men anymore. So I'm sure some of the men are going and getting vampire facials too because they're told, hey, you can look younger and feel better. And these people are just becoming so narcissistic that they're willing to cover their faces in blood if it means that maybe a wrinkle will go away. They just are so adamant in defying aging. And of course, we know how that'll tie in to the mark of the beast, all the stuff I've covered over the years in regards to how they're prepping you to eventually normalize blood transfusions of the youth. And of course, mixing in children's blood into adults' blood, then using it for facials, etc., and the fetuses, which we know they're all into. So let me just start for a second before I read you the details of the story about the blood Countess Elizabeth Bathory, okay? So this is a witch and a vampire who you don't hear in the same breath these days with people like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer because they don't want you to realize that witches were responsible for doing these things. They want you to think that people like us were just calling people witches because they smelled and they were ugly and we were Christians, so we're just pointing it out. They're actually mass murderers, and they were bathing in the blood of children. And it's no surprise either that the Countess Elizabeth Bathory was portrayed by Lady Barfbag in the television series American Horror Story, which numerous times throughout the theme of that show, which of course always covers things like the Antichrist, and always, the current season with Kim Kardashian, surprise, surprise, with satanic rituals, which I'll cover in a separate video. But they've covered this before in multiple seasons when they've covered witches. The witches were always bathing in the blood of the youth and the blood of other people as an anti-aging regimen that they used.
Madame LaLaurie was infamous for her vanity. Fought the rigors of age with a sacrament of expensive creams from Europe and something else far more exotic.
I'm running out. You're gonna have to get some more.
No, please don't make me.
You think I want to do this?
So it's not a surprise, too, that Lady Gaga portrayed this woman I'm talking about who is notorious for really normalizing these vampire-type facials and these blood baths. Because Lady Gaga in 2012, which I covered, Lady Gaga was caught leaving a hotel bathroom filled with blood, much to the astonishment of the maids that came in and found a bathroom that looked like a crime scene. And of course, these are stories they don't want you to know about because they don't want you to know that all of these so-called women in Hollywood are all real witches. And what they're doing is they're normalizing satanic rituals, and people out there aren't even blinking at this point. People out there literally are hearing people like me talk about this, and they laugh because they become so desensitized to all this stuff. You know, from the way that movies have evolved over the years and how much gorier, how much more extreme they've gotten. When they do stuff like this and celebrities just start normalizing this stuff, people become desensitized and they just go, oh, that guy's out of his mind. He's crazy. And we're at a point in 2024 where people are openly admitting to covering themselves in blood. You know, Putin is admitted to taking blood baths. These celebrities admit now to taking blood baths, and it's good antioxidant. Ooh, it's good for the body. It's good for the pores. That they're literally lining up, like you heard in the story I'm about to get into now, where these women are going to places and getting this procedure done. Okay, now, one of the tie-ins with this story is you might be saying, well, why are they actually reporting on it? Because you may have heard there's a lot of stories popping up about women who are getting Botox or getting butt injections, etc., and getting very, very sick and or dying. This is out there, and stories like this are out there because they don't want people to be able to perform these procedures unless they're government officials, okay? And that pretty much tells us that they're going to look to use these types of methods as well to get a certain something else inside of people's bodies, because if they're going to inject the blood plasma on their face, well, they might as well get a little bit of graphene oxide on there too. So this is going to eventually lead to the removal of cosmetic procedures where they can actually perform injections. And again, you've probably heard stories, just like I covered recently with these romance scams. There's tons and tons of stories out there about people who are getting these injections from people who are not really qualified to do it, and they're getting sick. The government doesn't care about you. The government wants to make sure the only ones who are giving you injections into your body are them. You'll have to go to them for these procedures. You won't have to worry anymore about if the person is putting like the wrong type of thing inside your body, because the government will just guarantee you that they'll put the wrong type of thing inside your body and not tell you about it. And we all know what that wrong thing is, and it has to do with gene editing. It's going to be another method for them. But let's look at this story that just came out. 3 women were infected with HIV during cosmetic vampire facial procedures at an unlicensed spa in Albuquerque, federal officials said Thursday. It is the first time that HIV transmission through cosmetic injection services has been documented. And again, the government does not, look, the government, if they have their way, and eventually they will, they want everybody to do vampire facials, okay? All the stuff that the wicked do in darkness is going to be normalized. So it's not about scaring you out of the vampire facial. It's actually about making sure you go to a licensed spa. And again, the licensed spas and the license this and the license that will all be government agency. They'll be connected to the government. And that way, they'll be able to get certain things inside your body. And these treatments are becoming more and more normal, which is scary. Right? We see more and more women getting Botox because the celebrities get it. And the women, you know, the housewives of Connecticut or whatever these shows are, they go and get it. And the Kardashians go and get it. And what no one's realizing is that these women actually look like a different species. Okay, none of these women are looking attractive to men. But they're like, look, they have no wrinkles. Yeah, they don't have any wrinkles, but they're suddenly looking like E.T., you know? They're suddenly looking like a human punching bag. So maybe not a good idea. But they've normalized that stuff by design again, because the more they can make people so obsessed cosmetically with themselves, it'll be easier for them to market the mark of the beast and these other things that will be marketed to them as beneficial to anti-aging, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, the Bible tells us in the book of Revelation, there'll be those who seek death and will not be able to find death. Okay, the mixing of iron and clay. So back to the story. The 3 women were among a cluster of 5 people sharing highly similar HIV strains, 4 of whom had undergone a procedure called platelet-rich plasma microneedling at the spa. The 5th individual, a man, had a relationship with one of the women. Investigators still do not know the precise source of the contamination. A 2018 HIV diagnosis in a patron who reported having no behavioral risk factors led to a public health investigation when the woman said she had received a cosmetic treatment involving needles called a platelet-rich plasma microneedling facial. It's really incredible how these people are so obsessed with their looks at this point and trying to defy aging so much so because, of course, this is all programmed into them. You think in the 1800s, people with gray hair were walking around going, does anyone know where I can get something to dye my hair? I got gray hair. Do you think people will go, I have a wrinkle. Can somebody do something about the wrinkle? Can someone punch me in the forehead so my wrinkle goes away? Nobody was thinking like this then. We think like this now because it's programmed into us. And that's part of the Mark of the Beast programming. We're all supposed to be very upset with aging. We're supposed to defy aging because they have the solution for that. Ultimately, transhumanism, mixing of iron and clay, men and women will not age anymore. There's a lot of stories out there that I've covered. Okay, a lot of this has to do with the blood transfusions of the youth, as well as your genetic code being altered and changed, which we know they're currently trying to do. But just the notion of this, that we're talking about this, where people are going and they're getting injected, they're getting platelet-rich plasma microneedling on their face, okay? On their face, because Kim Kardashian did it, because a couple other celebrities did it. And of course, the celebrities are showing you this stuff. You know, I'm surprised they're not coming out and talking about how some of these people are probably getting kuru. Okay, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about kuru on here, but probably not. I've covered kuru in the past. That was like 8 years ago. Even though I'm a new YouTuber, I covered kuru many times. Those videos are on the website. But if you're not familiar with kuru, it's kind of like these people get a little glitchy sometimes. You know, some of us might look at them and say that they're clones. That's why they're glitching. Well, some of them, you know, the kuru can make you glitch, kind of give you like a Parkinson's-like thing. And the kuru comes directly from the blood. And of course, I'm talking about consuming and bathing in the blood of others. So we know that's what they do. So they go on to talk about how this comes on the heels of an announcement by health officials earlier in the month that they're investigating a string of illnesses tied to counterfeit or improperly injected Botox containing high amounts of toxins, which is used in small doses to smooth wrinkles. This is about all of a sudden the government does not care about a small group of people who are getting, contaminations or getting sick from getting Botox. What they care about is who's allowed to give it, who isn't. Can they, once they have full control over every little thing, including cosmetics and cosmetic procedures, then they can get it inside your body. Okay. And that's all that this has ever been about, being able to gene edit you. So yeah, of course they're going to come out and say, look how many people every year get Botox. How many people do you think a year get Botox? I just Googled it, okay? Botox, on average, per year, 7.4 million people. So that's a lot of people. It's not like it's 30,000 people and you'd say they don't really care. And that's just Botox. Then you talk about some of these other procedures that, people are getting lip injections, right? They're getting butt injections. They're getting these things injected into them. So they want full regulation over that because it's just another way to get right into your bloodstream. And that's what it's all about. So the story isn't to protect people. And I'm surprised they even brought attention to it. In regards to the vampire facial, there's no chance that this is the first case reported of HIV or something along those lines from somebody who's getting a blood vampire facial. Okay? Like I said earlier, I'm sure most people or anybody that's gotten this should be in a mental health institution. But anyone who's gotten it's probably gotten side effects like kuru from getting it. But again, they're letting you know this stuff without the whole notion. Like, listen to the news clip. Like, I don't know what time period am I in? Like, it's so insane that we're listening to a news story where they're talking about somebody getting HIV instead of going, whoa, let's get away from that. What are people doing to themselves? Oh, they're giving themselves vampire facials and going, what in the Why are they doing this? How is this allowed? And more importantly, who is willingly signing up for this, right? But when you become a desensitized society, then these things start to get normalized little by little by little. And the fact that this is something being talked about where it's like, oh, it's a concern that some people are getting HIV instead of saying, how is this even legal? How is this even, people are asking for this? People are paying money to get a vampire facial because they think they might get one less wrinkle on their forehead, right? And like I said, when you look back at the origins of this stuff, they never mention this stuff. They're like, oh, vampire, because they want you to think vampirism is just make-believe, like somebody in Hollywood just came up with it. When the actual origins of vampires, which I covered in detail on the website, the origins of vampires comes from Bram Stoker. Everybody knows Bram Stoker. Like, oh yeah, Bram Stoker's vampire. But nobody asks the question, where did Bram Stoker get the idea? He got the idea from this thing called libel, okay, because there was a certain group of human beings who still exist to this day. In fact, you might be surprised to realize they have control of everything, the media, etc., which is why you don't hear these stories. Bram Stoker wrote it based off of the fact that this group of people was getting run out of every country they were in because they were literally performing what we would call vampire rituals. They were taking the blood of the youth, and they're still doing it to this day, right? So they talk about the vampire facial like it's some make-believe, oh, they're calling it the vampire facial, right? Because witches were bathing in the blood of young children, okay? And this all goes back to the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory. And it's no surprise that later on, Lady Gaga played this character in American Horror Story, which multiple times, like I've showed you, multiple times American Horror Story has talked about witches bathing in blood and using the blood of children and blood of other people to, of course, make themselves youthful, right? It makes them look better and their skin younger. And that was what the obsession was with Elizabeth Bathory, 600 young girls. Yet you never hear about Elizabeth Bathory. Why not? You don't hear about Elizabeth because Elizabeth was guilty of being a witch. That's why. They don't want you to think witches exist, right? So they don't want you to know about Elizabeth. And people would say, well, then maybe there was something to it. I mean, 600 people bathing in the blood. And then when you see that Lady Barfbag, who ended up playing her in a TV show before then, she wasn't practicing for the role. This was before that show ever came out. Lady Gaga was caught doing this in a hotel room. And of course, if you've followed the history of Lady Gaga and the sacrifice of her aunt, well, we all know how deep Lady Gaga's obsession with the occult runs, from the black goo all the way through to her taking baths in hotel bathtubs covered in blood. I mean, it's unbelievable. So we're talking about the vampire facial in 2024, but here's the problem. We're talking about the vampire facial, and it's something that's not only legal, they're talking about it passively, where they're like, oh, vampire facial. And you just go, come again? Oh, people are putting blood in their head, and they're like, so what? So what? Let to each their own. And you're surprised to find out that some of them are getting HIV? Huh? Yeah. Well, the only reason the government cares isn't because they want to stop you from getting a vampire facial. They, of course, want to make sure you go to a government agency, a licensed government agency, anytime you're ready to inject anything in your body. That way, they can make sure you get the right thing. And then you don't have to worry about some crazy person doing it and giving you the wrong injection that you don't want, because you can trust the government. So they'll give you the right Botox injection if you're going for that. They'll give you the right vampire serum, whatever you want to call it, if you go for that. But of course, that'll be mixed in with a little something like graphene oxide. That way, hey, if 7.4 million people are dumb enough to sign up for this, why not, the government says? Why not gain control over that as well? We don't need unlicensed cosmetic dealers. We'll control that as well. And we'll make sure it's just another means to an end for all of us, because ultimately it's about getting a certain something inside of your body. So folks, the vampire facial making the news. Right? I remember I covered this years ago, and it was just because the picture I'm sure everybody has seen of Kim Kardashian doing it. But it's incredible to see how we've gone the last couple of years. And then this gets talked about on the news, and they're like, hey, if you've gone for a vampire facial, well, you might want to think again about who you go to. Instead of being like, oh, what? Wait, what's going on? People are pouring blood on their face? Yeah, it's a little witchy, no? Oh, no, witches aren't real. Oh, right. Right, witches aren't real. But these are the same people who tell you to teach your kids about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. But witches aren't real. They've only been tried, persecuted, gone after century after century after century, but now all of a sudden they're not real. People were just making it up back then. And anybody who thinks about it now and believes it's real now, well, it's a crazy conspiracy theorist. But meanwhile, there's people who are bathing in blood and doing vampire facials. Go figure, right? I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.